Good morning, everyone. This is Terry Benson. I'm the Technical Assistant and Training Coordinator for the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey, and want to thank you for being a part of this presentation. Our usual host, Sharon Barker, is in a meeting right now, so again, I will be serving as the host for today. Just a few housekeeping issues. We do have our attendees on mute, but all attendees can type in questions, and we will make them available at this presentation to our presenter. This morning, we're very happy to have Mr. Daniel Randall from the Federal Home Loan Bank of New York. He is a business development officer, and we're very happy that he's here today because he's going to give us an update on their affordable housing program and their loan process and their application process. There have been some changes, and we're very happy again that he included us to let us know beforehand what to expect when this application becomes available. Just for some background information, the Home Loan Bank has set aside 10% of its private earnings to support the creation and preservation of housing for lower income families and individuals through their affordable housing program. And as mentioned, there is a specific application process that people must follow to be considered for this funding source. And for the rest of the day, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Randall. And thank you again, Daniel, for being part of this presentation.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks for having me. And I want to say thank you to Stacy, to Sharon, to Terry again, and to Nina for bringing me back. I was here about a year ago, so we had a conversation about the Affordable Housing Program back in May of 2017. And at that time, I shared the 4 phases of the life cycle. So we talked about the application process, progress reporting, initial monitoring, and long-term monitoring. So just as Terry pointed out, the Federal Home Loan Bank, we are a bank for banks. Federal is in our name, but we're privately owned. And what we really do is we provide financing to our member institutions, and it's called an advance. So that cheap loan goes to our member institutions, and then they in turn loan those funds to consumers. And every Federal Home Loan Bank, and there's 11 of them, has an affordable housing program. Now, since we last spoke, there has been a lot that has happened. There's been tax reform and its impact on tax credits. There has been, it seems like every time I pick up the newspaper, there's always an attack on middle and low income households. So now there's talk about HUD cuts again. So we've talked about that back in 2017. Now they're coming again in 2018. Also, Community Reinvestment Act reform. I'm very interested to see how they're going to come out with that. And we still are dealing with ongoing issues such as rent burden households and homelessness. So because of all these different changes, this prompted us to really take a look at the affordable housing program in general, just to see if we're meeting the needs of our district. Now, Stacy Berger, who is the leader of the network, she also serves on our advisory council. And as all of you know, Stacy is very skilled at getting her point across, and she does that really well. So we have taken her advice and looked at the program, along with the other members of the staff, looked at the program to see what we can do to make some changes. So today, for the next 45 minutes or so, we are going to talk about upcoming events. We will also do a round recap of the 2017 awardees. And then we're going to focus in on the application process and the new scoring criteria that we have for the 2018 round and beyond. We'll talk about next steps, and then there's going to be Q&A. But feel free to type in your questions as I'm going along this presentation. This is meant to be a dialogue, so if you have questions, you don't have to wait till the end to send those questions in. So upcoming events. First, it's very important to note that the 2018 implementation plan is on our website. It has all of the new scoring criteria in there in detail. So as I go through them here in the presentation, you can also take a look at the implementation plan to see the details behind each of those new scoring categories. We have large group presentations. So next week, I will be in upstate New York. Then on the 8th, I'll be in New York City. And we're going to be in St. Thomas and in San Juan, Puerto Rico in the middle of March. And then we're coming to the HMFA on the 29th. where we're going to do the in-person presentations. And we're also talking about doing an in-person presentation in Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey. So for the Southern Jersey folks, so that you don't have to make that trek up to Trenton, if you're interested in coming to the in-person presentations, we are thinking about you as well. Now, the in-person presentations, it's a little different from what we're going to talk about in the webinar. So the webinar is to give you an update on the scoring criteria, to let you know what new changes there are out there. The in-person presentations is a strategic conversation about how to get the points that you're seeking to get, and also the different pathways to success. So if you're ever in a scenario where you have submitted an application in the past and your projected score was, say, 70, and then by the time the analyst looked at everything, that final score after the round was over was 50. Yeah, this is the presentation for you, because we're going to talk about pitfalls and areas of how to get that application to get the score that you're really looking for so that it can be competitive. On an ongoing basis, we have technical assistance. So the round deadline, we expect, actually the round application package will be available the first week of April, and the round deadline will be mid-May, so about 45 days after we make the application package available on our website. But from now all the way till the round deadline, we do provide technical assistance. So feel free to contact me or reach out to our AHP mailbox, which is ahp@FHLBNY.com, to set up a conference call with any member of the team to talk about your specific application that you're thinking of submitting. So that application package, when it does come on our website, it's going to have the electronic application form. It will have what we call the RPW, or the Rental Application Workbook, the OPW, which is the Owner Occupied Application Workbook, and the Project Construction Form. And it's also going to have scoring tabs. So it's going to have tabs so that you can identify which scoring categories you want to go after. This is very important to note. This year, in 2018, all applications have to come through our secure portal. In years past, if you've ever submitted an application, we gave the option of a flash drive or through our secure portal, but in order to make sure that every application comes through securely, we are now pushing towards a secure portal. So if you're going to work with a member institution, you want to make sure that they have properly set up their secure portal with the Federal Home Loan Bank so that that application can come through in time. All right, so let's talk about the 2017 round, and we're going to jump into the changes for 2018. So in the 2017 round, we received 136 applications. 42 of those applications were approved, and we had 4 alternates. The range of scores for the winners were 80 to 60 points. There were 7 primary projects that requested subsidy that was greater than $20,000 per unit, and 3 of those actually requested the maximum for 2017, which was $30,000 per unit. New Jersey, for the second year in a row, won the most projects, had the most amount of winners. So there were 18 projects in New Jersey that won an award, 17 projects in New York, and there were some out of district projects that also won. But the key there is that for the second year in a row, New Jersey was the one with the most projects that were awarded an AHP commitment. The average subsidy was close to $900,000, and that was an increase from 2016. And then the last thing of note that I want to point out here for the 2017 round is we saw a decrease in the number of applications that were eliminated for not meeting the eligibility requirements. So it's now down to 4%. So if you compare that to 2016 when it was at 10%, or 2015 when it was at 29%, we're seeing a significant improvement in the submissions of those applications. So hand claps for everybody that submitted an application in 2017 for meeting the requirements. So along the lines of competitiveness and geographic diversity, I wanted to point out something here, and you'll see that Central New Jersey, since 2014 and 2015 and 2016 and 2017, has continued to rise in the competitiveness for projects coming out of Central New Jersey. In Northern and in Southern New Jersey, they have been doing well as good as well. So hovering at about 10% of the projects that were awarded funds. So New Jersey is well represented across the state for applications that win an award. Who can access these funds? So the 2018 round will be the 50th round since the program started. And in our 50th round, it so happened that it's the largest allocation that the program's ever had, $45 million. That is significant because we've also increased the subsidy per unit to $40,000 per unit. So for the 2018 round, it's $45 million or 7% of the allocation, or $40,000 per unit, whichever is less. So that works out to about $3 million for the max that you can ask for any AHP application, or $40,000 per unit, and we'll look to see whichever is less of those two amounts. The way that you get access to these funds is through our member institutions. Our member institutions are listed on our website. We have 330 members. Not all 330 have submitted applications on behalf of sponsors, but we do have some members that are actually a part of the network as well, that we can always provide a listing to you, that if you're interested in identifying some members that have submitted applications that are in an area that's close to you, we can work with you on that. Nonprofit, for-profit, housing organizations, state and local government agencies, and developers are the organizations that typically submit applications to those member institutions.
Excuse me, Daniel, I do have a question regarding the application process. Could we take that right now?
Absolutely.
Okay, one is you're just talking about that only the member banks make the application on behalf of the organizations. If you don't already have a relationship with one of those banks that are on that listing, is it possible to develop one in time for this application to be submitted?
Great question. And yes, so if you've never worked with that member institution before, there is an opportunity for that relationship to be established. And it really starts with reaching out to them and saying that you are interested in the affordable housing program, seeing if they have participated in the past, and if they have, seeing if they would submit an application on your behalf. Also, I sometimes jump in and I can sort of play Cupid and match you up with a member institution that has submitted in the past, that's looking for developers or sponsors to have an institutional relationship with. A lot of times for the member, they're very interested in submitting these applications as well, because they have the opportunity to also help with the capital stack of that project by providing a line of credit, by providing a construction loan or permanent financing. So it's a benefit to both the member and the developer in these scenarios. So I have no problem working with anybody that doesn't really know of a member institution to work with and that's looking for somebody to speak with.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to go through the 3 phases of review. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the eligibility, but again, the focus is really going to be talking about the scoring and the scoring changes that took place. So just as a recap, their application package must be submitted by a member institution through our secure portal. There's an eligibility phase, and we check to see if that application meets the basic eligibility requirements. And again, 96% of the applications that were submitted in 2017 did meet that requirement. All applications are going to be competitively scored and ranked based on the project's ability to satisfy the scoring categories, which we'll talk about. And then the highest ranking projects go through our financial review, where we're going to determine whether there's a need for subsidy, if it's operationally sustainable, and if it meets our feasibility criteria. So the projects that do well in those 3 phases will then be recommended for an AHP commitment. We will have primary projects, and then we'll have 4 alternate projects, and then we make the announcement. And we expect to make that announcement this year, sometime in the fall. Right now, it's hard to predict because we don't know how many applications we're going to receive, but we're definitely shooting for early fall to make the announcement. So in the project eligibility phase, The key thing to look for in eligibility is site control. So in 2015, when we had nearly 30 applications that were eliminated from contention, it was because site control was not provided to us. Now, site control, what we're really looking for is if you are working with the current owner and you're looking to purchase that property, there's a valid sales contract, and that sales contract is good through the end of the year. So for this, in this case, in the 2018 round, it needs to be good through December 31st, 2018. The other thing that we're going to look for is if the sponsor is qualified. That's a big one, because as we pointed out in the 2017 discussion that we had last year, there's 4 phases of the life cycle, and we need to make sure that the development plan is feasible. So if the development plan says that you're going to obtain financing 5 years from now, that project is not something that we think would fit within the framework of the AHP, because we need to make sure that the project is up and running in 4 years of receipt of that AHP commitment. And we want to make sure that they're drawing down those funds within 2 years of getting that commitment. And the project is fully funded by us by 3 years. So there's certain thresholds that we had that we need to make sure are met. So we're going to look closely at the development plan that's provided. Also, if the sponsor has never done an affordable housing project before and they submit an application that says they're going to do a 500-unit project that's going to be $100 million, it's more than likely we're probably going to go a separate direction, because we don't feel as though the capacity of that sponsor that's never done an affordable housing project will be able to take care of a project of that magnitude. So we're going to look at the capacity, we're going to look at the feasibility of the development plan, and if it makes sense, then we can move forward. All right, so I'm going to jump into project scoring, and again, I'm going to spend some time here because this is where a lot of the scoring changes took place. So there's 9 scoring categories. There's also some subcategories under those 9 scoring categories, and they all add up to 100 points. So donated property is 5 points, sponsorship is 7, targeting is the largest single category. I'll explain what I mean by single category, with 20 points. Homeless housing and empowerment are both worth 5 points. First district priority is worth 15 points. Second district priority is worth 25 points, but there's 5 subcategories in second district priority, each worth 5 points, and we'll jump into that in a little bit. And then subsidy per unit is 10 points, and community stability is worth 8 points. For the 2018 round and beyond, we've made changes to 4 of our categories: donated properties, economic diversity, subsidy per unit, and second district priority. And I'm going to spend some time talking about donated properties, economic diversity, and second district priority specifically. So for donated property, for those that submitted an application in the past, they might be aware of our former criteria, and that was if you purchased a parcel of land for $100 or a building for $250, you will qualify for donated property. The problem was that there's very little property in New Jersey or in New York that you can purchase for $250 for a building or $100 for a parcel. So it wasn't really reflecting what our market had. So we've made changes to that. So that change now shows that if you've purchased a property for 30% of the fair market value or less, you can get up to 3 points. Or if you've purchased the property for 10% of the fair market value or less, you can get 5 points. And in a scenario where you've obtained the land from the federal government at any price, whether it's whether it's $500,000 or $5 million, you would still get a point if it's acquired from the federal government. So we think with this change that the opportunity to pick up 5 points for donated property is a lot more feasible than it has been in the past. And the logic behind this was also because in both New Jersey and in New York, there's what is so-called vacant and abandoned properties. Some use the term zombie properties. And we really wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for developers and for sponsors that were going to take up that endeavor of purchasing these vacant and abandoned properties, rehabbing them, and then selling them to income-eligible individuals or renting them to income-eligible individuals, they had an opportunity to be competitive in the 2018 application round. All right, the next change that we made was first district priority. We have a category called economic diversity. Economic diversity is now worth 10 points, and what we did here is we simplified the scoring criteria. In the past, we had 5 tiers, and those 5 tiers, it really was restrictive. So what we've done is we've reduced those 5 tiers down to 2, and the goal here was really to make sure that if you qualify for points for economic diversity, you would still be able to max out points in targeting. So I'll explain what that means. In our targeting category for rental projects, if you have 60% of the units reserved for individuals that are very low income, which means 50% or less of the area median income, you get the full 20 points. But what would happen would be, you get the full 20 points in targeting, but then in economic diversity, you wouldn't get the full amount of points that were available. So those tiers have been simplified so that you can max out in both targeting and max out and get the full 10 points in economic diversity, depending on how you structure your project. And the tiers are also for owner-occupied projects. Now, for owner-occupied, the 60-40 split is in targeting doesn't apply for owner-occupied projects, but in economic diversity, you can still pick up the full 10 points if you have 30% of the units reserved for moderate or higher income units that are located in a low or moderate income neighborhood, or vice versa, if you have 100% of your very low income units located in a high opportunity area. So again, we think that this is an opportunity for projects to pick up points in those scoring categories. Second district priority. So in second district priority, there's a total amount of points of 30 points, but we max out this category at 25 points. And there's 5 categories in here where you can get the points. So the first thing I want to talk about is project readiness. In project readiness, we had this scoring category in the past, but what we've done is we've simplified it. And the goal here is really to make sure that smaller projects and owner-occupied projects weren't going to be negatively affected by our scoring criteria. So when we looked at the performance of projects over the last several years, we saw that in 2017, only 1 project was an owner-occupied project. In 2016 and in 2015, only 2 projects were owner-occupied projects. Over the course of the last 5 years, less than 20% of the applications that we approved were smaller projects in nature. So when we did our research and we asked some of the owner-occupied developers and we asked some of the sponsors of smaller projects, what's going on in our scoring criteria that makes it difficult to pick up points? We got a lot of fantastic feedback. And some of that feedback was, we had scoring criteria that said that if you had ownership of the site, not just site control, but actual ownership, the deed, we would give you points. And if you had a construction contract, we would give you points. Or if you had your permits, we would give you points for those areas. But smaller projects don't necessarily always have the financial resources to own the site already, or to have the construction contract in place. So they were at a competitive disadvantage based off of the way that we structured those scoring categories. So what we've done is we've pulled back and we simplified it so that to get the maximum amount of points for project readiness, we're going to keep the approvals, but all you need to provide to us is a final site plan approval, and we're going to keep the other funding commitments. But rather than having 100% of your commitments approved, now it's 75% of your commitments have to be approved. So we've simplified it there. And we've also done away with the ownership of the site. That's no longer a scoring category. And we've also pulled out the construction contract so that we can give the smaller projects an opportunity to be competitive with the LIHTC deals. And since I'm talking about LIHTC deals, LIHTC projects that picked up the full amount of points in years past were typically the projects that were already under construction. They experienced some cost overruns, and that's why they were able to show us their permits. That's why they were able to show us their permits and their 100% of their other financing and the construction contracts. That's because they were already in construction, which is fine. But we want to get more projects that are, very close, and they just need that one last push from another funding source to get off of the ground. So that's really what we're targeting going forward. The next subcategory is owner-occupied projects. If your project is an owner-occupied project, 5 points right off the bat. It's that simple. No documentation requirements outside of you indicating that on the electronic application form. And small projects. If your project is 25 units or less, 5 points right off of the bat. So again, we've really trying to show that smaller projects and owner-occupied projects are very important to us. We want to see them increase in competitiveness in the 2018 round and beyond. And we hope by giving them, maybe up to a 10-point boost for a small owner-occupied project, that we'll see more of them be competitive. And for the smaller rental projects, they get that 5-point boost. But they're very important to us as well, because those are the ones that really get to the core of neighborhoods and meet the needs of those neighborhoods. So we want to see them be competitive as well. The next subcategory under second district priority is supportive housing. This is one where we haven't done it in the past, but we think it's very important that there is a financial opportunity for sponsors who are going to create housing for special needs housing, that they have the financial resources to provide those funds to them. And we want to do that as well. So if your project has at least 20% of the units that are reserved for occupancy by households with special needs, and that can be physically or mentally disabled, persons recovering from domestic abuse, persons recovering from chemical dependency, ex-offenders, persons with HIV or AIDS, then you may be eligible for this scoring category. What we were looking for with regard to documentation is the supportive housing project must have a social service plan, and also it has to have an agreement that's signed by the social service provider. So if we see those, the plan, the signed agreement, and at least 20% of the units are reserved for individuals that meet our definition for supportive housing, then the full 5 points will be issued. So it's not like our other scoring categories where it's on tiers, where you start off with 1 point, and if you have 40% of the units, you might get 2 points. If 20% of the units are reserved for those individuals, the full 5 points would be awarded.
Daniel, we had a question that came in regarding the supportive housing. Does the social service provider have to provide services on site for you to accept that as an appropriate plan or relationship?
So what we'll do, is we look at the social service plan to see how in depth it goes. So if it's something where it's the service that's going to be provided is off site, but it's really going to be for the benefit of that household or the people that are going to occupy that building, then that's something that we will consider and we can move forward with. So it really depends on how well that service is going to be for the people that occupy the building. And we'll see that by reading through the social service plan and seeing what's going to be provided.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But in general, it's not explicitly restricted to on-site. It's really about how well that service is. All right, and the last subcategory within second district priority is a new category that's called desirable sites. So if your project is in close proximity to public transportation, so within 1/4 mile of a bus stop or 1/2 mile of a train station, or if it's within 1 mile of a food retailer, up to 2.5 points will be awarded if it's in close proximity to public transportation, or 2.5 points would be awarded if it's in close proximity to a food retailer. So a total of 5 points can be picked up in the desirable sites initiative that we have. We have some details in our implementation plan on what qualifies as a food retailer. So, when we were looking at the scoring category, HMSA, they call it a grocery store. We did food retailer because it could be a grocery store or it could be a food retailer that provides healthy food options, but doesn't necessarily fit that definition of a grocery store, such as sometimes you'll see some of your smaller stores like a CVS that also has a grocery component to it that may be eligible for this scoring category. And what we've looked at is we looked at the USDA, and they have what's called a food desert map. and they have a certification for all of the stores that provide healthy food options. So in our implementation plan, we've laid out the definition for what qualifies as a food retailer, and in the application package, there'll be a link so that you can click on the different food retailers that would qualify for this scoring category. So I want to stop here before I go into the project financial review and see if there's any questions with regard to the new scoring categories that we have. Just to recap, we have donated property. We're really trying to address the market needs that are out there. We thought our definition in the past was too restrictive. We think this is going to be a good opportunity for projects that purchase vacant and abandoned properties and get them back up to par to pick up points in that scoring category. We've talked about mixed income housing. So if you have a project that's in a low income neighborhood that's going to bring in higher income units in that neighborhood, you can qualify for points. Or if you have a project that has very low income units that will be in a high opportunity area, you can qualify for points in that scoring category. We also have second district priority, where we have simplified project readiness, where now it just boils down to if you have your final site plan approval and 75% of your other financing, you can get 10 points. If you're a small project, you can get 5 points. If you're an owner-occupied project, you can get 5 points. If you have supportive housing, and at least 20% of those units are reserved for individuals that have special needs, 5 points. Or if your project is in close proximity to a train station, a bus stop, or a food retailer, 5 points. All those things we think will open up the pathways to success for a variety of projects that really need to be developed to meet the market demand and the needs of our district, specifically talking about New Jersey, northern, central, and southern New Jersey. So are there any questions with regard to those scoring criteria?
Not at this time.
Okay. All right, so we'll push on to project financial review. Project financial review, again, what we're going to look for is we're going to look at the capital side of the project. We'll evaluate the acquisition, the soft costs, the hard costs, the developer fee, any reserves that are in the deal, and also the total project cost. And all those have to be substantiated. It's easy to substantiate the acquisition costs, not so easy to substantiate the soft costs. We'll verify the hard costs by looking at the construction contract or whatever cost documentation is provided to us. And then we'll verify and cross-reference that with the other funding sources that are on the deal to make sure that the costs that are projected to us are the similar costs that are projected to the other funding sources. We'll look at the capital stack. And then whatever that difference is between the total project costs and the other funding sources that have either been committed to the project or that are pending, that's what the AHP can come in for the difference. And when we come in for that difference, we'll also verify the operating side of the project. So we'll look at how much rents are going to be charged for the occupants of that building and make sure that the rents don't exceed 30% of the projected income for those households. If the rents are considered to be affordable, the next thing that we're going to do is to see if the aggregate amount of the income that's going to be generated for this project can cover all of the operating expenses, and if there's any debt service, if it's going to cover the debt service as well. Then we'll do an analysis on the cash flow and make sure that the cash flow isn't too much. If the cash flow is too high, then what we'll say is that with this amount of cash flow, it could source more debt on the project, which means that there might not be a need for AHP subsidy. If the cash flow is too low, then we are going to question whether or not this project is going to be feasible for the duration of the retention period, which is 15 years. So it really has to fit within a margin. We want to see that there's not too much cash in the deal, but not too little as well. And if it does show that there's a sufficient amount of cash flow in the project and it's projected to be operationally sustainable, the last thing that we're going to do is verify that it meets our feasibility criteria. In the rental project workbook and in the owner project workbook, we have a set of financial feasibility criteria, and we'll verify if it fits within those thresholds. If it does, we can push forward. If for some reason it's higher than our thresholds, we'll need to get backup documentation and an explanation for why it's higher than our thresholds. So for instance, if the architect fee on your project is 15% and our threshold is 7%, we'll need to get an explanation for why that architect's fee is that high. And sometimes it may make sense. Other times it may not. And depending on if it makes sense, we'll take it to our board of directors and we will ask for an exception. And if they grant that exception, we can move forward with the project.
Daniel, we did get a new question in. It is asking, do new builds qualify for this program?
New construction projects?
Yes.
Absolutely. So the AHP funds.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, the AHP funds can be used for acquisition, new construction, or rehabilitation. And we typically see new construction and rehab coming in for the application process. And it's probably, we haven't pulled the data, but it's probably very close to 50-50 when it comes to new construction and rehabilitation. We don't see a lot of requests for acquisition, and that's more because of the timing. The application round, depending on how many applications we receive, can take 3 to 5 months. So if you're looking for funds for acquisition, it may not make sense. So that's how we see it come in for new construction and rehab.
Okay, and we have another question that came in. What is the smallest number of units allowed?
The smallest number of units allowed, we don't have a restriction, so it could be a 1-unit project. What we've seen is, we've seen group homes, and we've also seen, 2-unit deals have come in as well. So we don't have a restriction on the smallest number of units that can be submitted.
Okay. Another question. Could you explain a little bit more what you mean by owner-occupied?
Yeah, owner-occupied projects are projects where you can have an owner rehab project where the sponsor is going on around the neighborhood and they're identifying homes that are already owned by a household that need roof repair or emergency repair. And they would be willing to provide rehab work on that household, but they need resources to do so. Or an owner rehab project can be one where the sponsor, it's like a habitat project where the sponsor purchases the land, they build on that land, then they sell it to an individual that's income eligible for them to own for the long term.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions?
One just came in. It was asking about the max subsidy.
Yes.
I believe you said it was $40,000 per unit. Does that have, in your review, do you compare that to the size of the project in any way? Let's say if it's a smaller project, they can still request up to the $40,000?
Yes, fantastic question. And this is something that we're going to speak in detail about in our in-person presentation when we talk about strategy. So we've increased it to $40,000 per unit. There's a scoring category that we have that's called subsidy per unit. And the way that it works is the more that you ask, the less points that you get in that scoring category. So what we saw in years past when we had it at $20,000 per unit back in 2015, all the way back to 1990, the smaller projects, because they don't have a lot of financial resources, they're not like a tax credit deal where they have bond financing available, conventional financing available to them, and different resources that they can provide, that they can ask for. A smaller deal really only has some equity, and then maybe the AHP, and then maybe a small grant from somebody. And because they don't have a lot of financial resources, their ask from the AHP was very high. So they would ask for, $15,000, $17,000 per unit. And because they were asking for $15,000, $17,000 per unit, when the cap was at $20,000, their score in that subsidy per unit category would be very low, and they wouldn't be competitive. So in 2016, we increased it to $30,000 per unit, but we didn't see a lot of movement. And we didn't see a lot of movement because I don't know if the sponsors of smaller projects felt comfortable going beyond that. So as I pointed out in one of the earlier slides, of the 42 projects that we approved, I think there were 7 that asked for more than $20,000 per unit, and 3 asked for the full $30,000. And those were some of the smaller deals. But we want to see even more than that. So we've increased it to $40,000 per unit, and we've also updated our formula so that if you ask for $20,000 per unit, a smaller project would still score really well in the subsidy per unit category. If you ask for $20,000 per unit, you'll still score pretty well in that subsidy per unit category, because we recognize that we are one of the few resources out there that can provide that financing for a smaller project. for an owner-occupied project. So the goal is, yes, there is a scoring category that we have that takes points away for the more that you ask, but by increasing it to 40,000 per unit and also making adjustments to our formula, we think that there's less of a punishment for those smaller projects and for owner-occupied projects if they do have to ask for $25,000 per unit.
Thank you. I have no other questions at this time.
Okay. So the round announcement, again, for 2018, we're trying to do that in the fall. We do recognize that HMFA typically, at least last year, they made their announcement. It looked like, I believe it was in August or September. So we are cognizant of our funding partners and when they make the announcement. I do want to point out that if you do win an AHP commitment, that once you sign the direct subsidy agreement, you can submit a drawdown request to drawdown on those funds, so long as you meet all of the drawdown requirements, obviously. But that is an option that's available to the sponsors once they get an AHP commitment. So we're coming to the end. We are approaching 42 minutes, so we're on track. I just want to go through some of the next steps, and that is, if you have an interest in submitting an application or learning more about the AHP, then you definitely want to read through the implementation plan that's on our website and pay close attention to the new scoring criteria and all of the changes that were made to it. The next is, this is an opportunity to now start reaching out to our member institutions and asking if they will be willing to sponsor your project for the submission in early April. Then attend one of our in-person presentations. Again, it's going to be a strategic conversation. This is about making sure that you get the score that you're trying to obtain. We also want to make sure that you recognize the different pathways to success. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you always have to ask for less subsidy per unit. You can ask for all the subsidy that you need, and maybe that means that you try to pick up points in one of the second district priority categories, whether it's desirable sites or supportive housing, or through project readiness. So we'll talk about different pathways to success. After that, once that application package is made available in April, you want to read through that application package and you want to contact the staff to do a conference call to make sure that as you're putting that package together, it's done correctly. And once that's done, for our member institutions that are out there, make sure that you contact us and have your technical team work with our tech team to make sure that the secure portal is set up so that you can take those applications when the sponsors submit them to you. And finally, you want to make sure that you read through our information, but also view our tutorials once we make them available on our website in early April. And if you do that, you'll be very prepared for the application that comes up in 2018. And I also want to extend my services as well. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email address is Daniel, D-A-N-I-E-L, .Randall, R-A-N-D-A-L-L, @FHLBNY.com. And I'll be glad to assist in any way that I can to get you into the right people's hands. And Terry,
we did have one other question. Someone was asking for the website address, please. Is it the Federal Home Loan Bank of New York?
Yeah, so the website is www.FHLBNY.com. And then at the top of that screen, on the right-hand side, there's going to be a tab that says Community. Once you click on that Community tab, you'll see Affordable Housing Program, and then that's where the information will be.
Okay. And I want to thank you very much for doing a very thorough update as to what to expect with the new application process. I'm sure this is very, very helpful to our members, and just gives us a good head start to know what to expect with this new round. Again, I want to say thank you for everyone that has attended the webinar. And it will be presented on our website within the next 24 hours that you could listen at another time. I know we had a lot of information presented. And again, Daniel, I do want to thank you for taking the time to speak to our network members. It's been very, very effective and provided a lot of information to us. So I wish
Great.
you all a great day. And if you do have any questions, they can reach out to you. And I do thank you for giving us your personal email address. And we do hope and wish you much success with this round of application reviews.
Sounds great. Thank you, Terry. Thank you, the network.
Thank you. And everyone, have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.